All right, preparing live stream. We are good. Greetings and welcome to another episode of the Unnamed Bracketology podcast. My name is Kerry Miller, joined as always by my good friend Graham Doran. It is our midweek, mid-majors extravaganza, which used to include the Big East. Graham, you sent over your seed list earlier today, and I was going to suggest that we don't even really bother talking Big East today, and you had already decided not to include them on your seed list anyway. So it is all mid majors today. But I think we can touch on the Big East for like just a second, if you want to at least mention where you have Seton Hall right now, because I don't have them close.
Yeah, I think Seton Hall is still alive. That's the important thing. They still have an opportunity to get there, but I don't have them close either. If I had to guess, they're probably somewhere in that next four out territory, but I really stop after four because if you're not within four, you're not really a serious threat to be in yet. Doesn't mean you're dead, just means you're not a serious threat to actually be in the tournament.
Yeah, I went out to 76 today, not in any sort of preparation for the future, but just so many Big 12 teams got into the conversation last night that I just kind of wanted to see where everybody is. And I think I ended up with Seton Hall at 75 and then San Diego State at 76. But yeah, they're pretty far out. They need to beat St. John's this weekend and very likely beat UConn in the Big East semifinals. And then at that point, just go ahead and win that auto bid for us so we don't have to worry about it. Help us shrink the field by one while we're at it. But let's throw up this spreadsheet with the mid majors. We are down to 9 teams on here. Although that might be up to 9, down to 9. Maybe nine's where we've been at all along. The 3 West Coast Conference teams, who all they have left is their conference tournament. The 3 Mountain West teams, which might be a one bid league. We'll get into that in a little bit. Props to you for saying that might be a possibility 2 months ago. Miami, Ohio, of course, and then the 2 A10 teams. Where would you like to start, Graham?
I think Utah State is to me the story of the night
Yep.
because we went from a Utah State that was secure in the field and really had to just not blow it to a team that looks like maybe they're going to blow it. Utah State, if you look at what they've done against Q1 and Q2, looks pretty good on the surface. But once you get down into actually looking at the results, you really struggle to see where they're winning against tournament teams. I think Utah State is still in the field, but they're in trouble.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think at this point, the season finale at home against New Mexico, I mean, if they win that, they're locked. If they lose that, it gets interesting. I think they then have work to do in the Mountain West tournament, whereas it puts New Mexico in much better shape. I mean, that would be whereas Utah State is 28 right now, so that would at least temporarily be a quad 1A win. Probably stay a quad 1A if it's top 40, but yeah, I think that has now become right. Last week it was Texas A&M was the massive bubble game. Now this weekend it's going to be uh, New Mexico at Utah State. Yeah, the 10-5 against quads 1 and 2 is great. I mean, prior to last night, they were 7-0 against quad 2, but now they've been swept by UNLV, who is otherwise 14-14. I was I was looking for whatever reason I was on the 2025 Torvik tab last night, and I was about to send out a tweet that UNLV is 2-14 against quads 1 and 2 or something, but that was last year. They're actually like 7-7 against quads 1 and 2. They've been a bit of a spoiler for sure this year, but that's still 2 bad losses. And the big thing for me is that Utah State, it's possible they literally haven't played a team that's going to make the tournament. I mean, outside of the fact that somebody from the Mountain West is going to make it eventually, but like right now, if you're looking, we have New Mexico both right here 43 44. We have VCU 46 45, and that's their two of their 3 best wins at Boise State. They're not really in the conversation even after their win over San Diego State last night, and San Diego State's pretty much dead at this point after their loss. So I a 6 loss team that didn't play anyone in the tournament, and here we are debating whether a 0 loss team that didn't play anybody in the tournament belongs in the field. So I don't know if I'm all the way sold on Utah State being safely in, especially if they lose on Saturday. But if they do lose, I mean, I'm not looking at the Mountain West bracket, but just off the cuff, what do you think they need to do to avoid falling out? Because I think they would still be narrowly in at that point.
Yeah, I think they'd probably still narrowly be in. If they avoid losing their first game, they're probably okay. But I wouldn't want to test that theory. If they get to the final, I think they're safe. It's where you get into that win the first game, but maybe lose in the semi that it gets really interesting. But I think if they lose their first game, they're probably out. So really, to me, the breaking point is the semis enough? Is the semis not enough?
I think the interesting dynamic now is if they lose this game, if New Mexico beats Colorado State tonight, they would be tied. So then New Mexico would be the 1 seed. So then Utah State would probably get a neutral game against San Diego State in the semifinals. That would be a borderline quad one. I think what San Diego State's at 47 in the net, so we'll see where that actually lands. But that would at least that would look good. It might also help then the Aztecs make a case, although I think they're probably too far gone at this point. But flip side of that coin, if New Mexico wins, uh, do you think they become a lock, or what did they need to do in the Mountain West tournament? I don't think they'd be a lock.
I don't think I'd call them a lock, but I would say it's hard for me to imagine them missing at that point. Even if they were to lose their first game in the Mountain West Conference tournament, it's tough to see them losing. I wouldn't test that theory, but I think they would probably hang into the bracket at that point. I think that Utah State road win would really resonate with a at that point we're talking about worst case scenario 22-8 in the worst case scenario for New Mexico. And you look at the quad one wins, they've already got two. This would be a third one, and this one would be probably a quad 1A win. It's, maybe potentially if Utah State loses by a bazillion points, not, but almost certainly a Q1A win. So I think New Mexico, if they pick up that victory, very, very likely in the field.
All right. Now, I know we did this before, but over under, probably before we were going over under 2.5, but now 1.5 Mountain West teams in the tournament when all is said and done. Do you think it'll be a multi bid league or not?
I think we're probably looking at a multi-bid league. I think whoever wins the Utah State New Mexico game is probably getting in as an at-large because I'll take everybody else in the field of the Mountain West tournament to win that other bid.
Yeah. I think I agree. It's probably going to be a little bit of bid thievery to get to two. But let's go to the other West, the West Coast Conference. Obviously, Gonzaga is a lock. We both think St. Mary's is a lock. I have them at 23. You have them at 26. Either way, that's 6, 7. They're very good. Santa Clara is the tough one. As I was typing these in and had to decide whether a neutral game against Minnesota or a road game against Xavier was their second best win of the season, I instantly started feeling a lot less confident in the Broncos getting in. But I think if they get that neutral win over St. Mary's in the semifinals, which I believe would be on Sunday night, maybe Monday night. I forget when the West Coast Conference tournament runs, but they're going to run into St. Mary's as long as they beat probably Pacific in their quarterfinal. Will that be enough, or do they need to beat Gonzaga? Or, I mean, depends on bid thieves.
I keep looking at the Santa Clara profile and thinking that WAB is too good for this
Yeah,
profile. And I don't think the committee is going to buy it. I know they're talking about how important it is, and it definitely could play a significant role in their selection. I tend to think they're probably going to have to win that St. Mary's game because to your point, I'm looking at those wins. And if St. Mary's was on the road and they did the road win exchange program, I'd probably feel a lot different about their profile. But now you look away from home and at Xavier is really the only win away from home that has any significance. I think the other problem they could potentially have is what they did out of conference. And it's almost like they'd be better off had they not scheduled anyone out of conference, because you look at the teams they lost to Arizona State. That wasn't a true road game. If it was a true road game, I'd feel a little bit different about it. They went to New Mexico. Now they've got a loss to a bubble team, but in blowout fashion. If they had lost that game close, I'd feel a little bit differently about it. And played St. Louis well, but they lost to St. Louis. I think
Yep.
given the number of times they've had opportunities, you would expect more out of Santa Clara. They're almost like Ohio State, but mid-major version. And you've just had so many chances. Why are you not converting more against this level of competition? I think regardless of what the metrics say, Santa Clara probably has to beat St. Mary's.
So you say Santa Clara is like Ohio State. I was going to say the same thing about VCU, where it's like every team in this conversation has a win over VCU. Why doesn't VCU have a win over anybody in this conversation? They got those neutral wins over South Florida, Virginia Tech. Those are both, hovering between quad one and quad two. I saw Lenardi last night during whichever game it was. He was saying, VCU got the benefit of now that South Florida win is quad one. I'm like, oh no, don't say that. It's the same win. Why does it matter? But yeah, let's go to VCU because they do have a very intriguing game. I think it's Friday night at Dayton. That would be at least temporarily quad one. Catch 22 type of game. You don't want to win it too convincingly because you'd like it to stay quad one, but that would fall right into the same bucket as those South Florida and Virginia Tech wins that, pretty good metrically, and they already have good enough metrics. They don't have any quad three or quad four losses, which sets them apart from most of the teams on here. St. Mary's and obviously Miami, Ohio, obviously the only other ones without any quote unquote bad losses, but if VCU wins that game, and let's assume St. Louis wins at George Mason, although I'm sure the Patriots will have something to say about that. But let's say they both win. Is that a lock for a two bid A10?
No, not a lock for a two-bit
Ooh.
A10. I feel good about a two-bit A10, but to your point about VCU, it's the same thing that we're seeing across all these teams here. If Virginia Tech doesn't beat UVA, they're probably out of the field. South Florida is not going to be an at-large bid.
Yeah.
So, from the tournament committee's eyes, this is a team that's not in the field and won't be until we figure out who the American champion is at the very last moment. And then you look at down the line, Dayton, Davidson, Duquesne, all good wins, especially if they pick up this road win over Dayton. But I just think there's a certain level to the Santa Clara thing where you have so many opportunities against, like, what did we just talk about with Utah State? Utah State's not a lock. New Mexico's not a lock. Like, you would think they would get one of these teams at some point, and they really didn't. That Virginia Tech game, I think VCU would really like Virginia Tech to beat Virginia, because if Virginia Tech is a tournament team, yeah, it takes one bit away from the field, but it shows you could be a tournament team away from home. And I do think there's a lot of value in that for VCU. I don't think VCU is a lock if they win at Dayton, but I think they're in pretty good shape as long as they don't lose early in the A10 tournament. The A10 final being so late in the week is a fantastic thing for VCU because the committee will probably be deciding on a VCU that only has 7 losses as opposed to whenever they would have picked up that 8th.
I do think the big thing for VCU, at least as it compares to Utah State, I mean, obviously the bad thing is that they lost on a neutral court to the Aggies, but um, whereas Utah State has been swept by UNLV and has picked up, a couple of losses there. I mean, all 5 of the, if South Florida doesn't get in, that's 5 losses to non-tournament teams. VCU only has that one quote unquote bad loss at George Mason when George Mason was like at its absolute peak. I think that has to come up to some extent. Like if you're keeping it VCU out because of that one loss to, their only loss to a team that's definitely not getting in with an at large. So I think that could help them out. Obviously, the metrics are solid. I think they're top 50 and everything except for maybe Torvik has them at like 52, something like that. But yeah, I think I agree with you. If they win this game, they, right now you have them as your last team in. They're my second to last in. Like they would probably temporarily, ironically. They need to beat Dayton to get ahead of Dayton. I think they would probably move to like 41, 42 on the overall seed list, and then we'll see how the bid thieves and the rest of the bubble decides to play around them. If the rest of the way it's like it was on Saturday and bubble teams are just losing left and right, great, VCU's in. They're in now because of Saturday. But if it's like it was last night and like all these teams are coming out of the woodwork and getting, wins over BYU and Texas Tech, I think that, there's not much they can do about it, unfortunately. That's the trouble of being in the A10. But stay in that league. We're going to save Miami, Ohio for last, of course. But St. Louis, if they lose to George Mason, what do they need to do? Because where you have them in the middle of the 9 line feels better to me than where I have them. I just don't like anybody in that range. So I ended up with them at 31 right now. But I feel like if the Billikens lose that one, I mean, they lose their cushion for sure.
Yeah, I think the cushion would be gone. Same deal as VCU. They have the advantage of not taking that loss till the end of the A10 tournament if they don't trip up early. So I'm gonna say VC or St. Louis if they lose to George Mason, as long as they make it to Saturday in the A10 tournament, I think they're fine.
I think I agree with that. I think they're going to beat Mason anyway. Sadly, Mason was a fun story for a while, but yeah, they've been kind of dead here for a little while. Although St. Louis isn't playing so great lately either.
I
All right.
mean, one big thing with St. Louis is similar to what we talked about with New Mexico. New Mexico has a lot of wins against the bubble, so it kind of shows maybe you place them above some of these other teams. St. Louis has big advantage with the sweep of VCU and the Santa Clara win.
They also have this big advantage: only 3 losses, whereas we're comparing them to 7-loss VCU, 7-loss Santa Clara. I think that has to come up.
The other thing they have going for them, and it usually doesn't tend to play as big of a role in selection, but I think with mid majors, it tends to play a bigger role than it does with non mid majors. Really good efficiency metrics. I think if the committee is wondering how good is this team really, they're going to see good efficiency metrics. They're going to see a very strong overall record against quads 1 and 2. St. Louis should be fine. I think it's not a slam dunk. But even if they lose to George Mason, I would be very surprised if St. Louis isn't in the bracket.
Yeah, St. Louis now feels like St. Mary's felt before they got that win over Gonzaga to kind of seal the deal, right? Just limited losses, great metrics, couple of good bubble wins. Yeah, I think even if they lose, they'd still be in with some room to spare, like you said, as long as they at least show up for the A10 tournament. You can't go out and like lose to Loyola Chicago or something stupid. Although, did I miss that? They play Loyola Chicago tonight, don't they? They do.
Yes, they do play Loyola tonight.
Yeah.
Good catch. And then the other, that's actually part of why I didn't lock them is because they play
Yeah.
Loyola Chicago.
Forgot that.
Which is, by the way, worth like basically no WAB at all. So
Yeah.
really not a game you want to play because it could totally crater your entire season, but gives you basically no benefit to winning. But in aside about St. Louis, looking back at where they're seated right now, being kind of in the middle of that 9 line, I do tend to think that they'll get the opportunity if they do win out from here to move on up. I know you have them at that 8 seed. I just tend to think the quad 1 and quad 2 record at that point, if they can beat George Mason, will be so outstanding that the committee's going to have to put some respect on it.
Yeah, I think they had at least one non D1 win, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah,
I believe they
against
played Avila.
Principia.
That's who it was, Principia.
So if they win out, they would be 30-3 against D1, and that will look pretty nice, having 30 wins. But
I
we
just
won't need to
realized I
discuss
said
them.
I thought their game was against Avila. I can't believe
Hmm.
that came out of my head. I knew exactly who it was, and I said the wrong thing. I said Avila.
Yeah. All right, we gotta do it. We gotta talk Miami, Ohio. If they beat Ohio on Friday, is there any scenario where you ultimately leave them out of your bracket?
My thing with Miami, Ohio is I cannot and will not call them a lock no matter what because they are such a unique profile. But I promise you, there's a 0% chance that they are out of my bracket if they win this final game. If they win their final game, they're in. Does that say Ohio State as their last remaining game?
I think that got did say Ohio State. I know
There,
who it is. That
at
would be a big
Ohio.
game.
Yeah, at Ohio. I honestly thought you were just messing with the Ohio State fans by referring to the Bobcat. Ohio State, but
No, that
I,
was
I really
a
think
typo.
if they win that one, no doubt, 100%, they're going to be in my final bracket. It's just a matter of where they're seated.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Like, if I'm gonna be wrong, I'm gonna at least be on the right side of history on this. I mean, they are the more deserving team. I mean, you see their WOB 2.42. That's better than St. Louis. It's better than Santa Clara. It's a lot better than Auburn. Where is Auburn? Are they
Ooh,
like right
so
at
speak
zero?
of that, I think we're looking at a potential really fantastic storyline. If Miami were to beat Ohio and then lose in the MAC tournament, they could draw Auburn in the first four if Auburn wins at Alabama. Now that would be the absolute best first four game of all time.
That would be that would be pretty awesome. And then the other game would be like Indiana VCU or something. Like we we would have trouble getting excited about the other one, but that would be an incredible one. All right, if let's say they lose on Friday and then lose to Akron in the championship game, is there any scenario where you do have them in your bracket?
I think they're probably still in that scenario. It would be really close though, but I think they're probably in at that point.
Yeah, I think I would. I've been saying all along that I would keep them in if they lose one and then lose in the championship game to Akron. I mean, it'd be fun to have a two bid MAC. I'll at least say that much. I'm rooting for that scenario as opposed to an 11th SEC team or, no offense, Virginia Tech or, USC sneaking in or some garbage like that. So, um, but I'd rather see them go undefeated. That would be where do you think if they get there, if they go 34-0, well, I guess technically as far as the NCAA is concerned, they're 31-0 because they played three non D1 games. But where do you think they would be? Because right now you have them at 41. I have them at 37. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get them any higher than that. Like I've been just kind of do-si-doing them at 37 and 38 for forever, it seems.
Yeah, it's interesting. Earlier in the year, I thought I was going to get them up to a 9 seed if they went undefeated. And now I tend to think I'm going to get them to a 10 seed if they go undefeated and 11 otherwise. And I think it really just comes down to what we're seeing is at the end of the year, it's that bubble that looks really bad. But now it's the teams right above that keep picking up wins. Now Georgia's
Yeah.
beating Alabama. UCLA is picking up a 20-point win against Nebraska. All of those teams are just starting to incrementally pass Miami. For me, TCU won at Texas Tech. Texas A&M beat Kentucky. There's nothing you can do if you're Miami in that scenario. These teams are probably just going to pass you.
Yeah. So for me to have them at 37, I do still have them ahead of I have Texas A&M at 38. I have UCLA at 40. I didn't move either of those teams up all that much for home wins. They move a little bit more comfortably into the field, but I didn't like, skyrocket them or nothing. But yeah, I do feel like the committee will always put the most confusing resume as a 9 seed. They seem to do that every single year. So I'm like inclined to believe they would be in a 9 game. And I want to see them as the 9 seed opposite Michigan. I just think that would be fun. Everybody's going to pick the 8 seed to win because they're so sick of talking about Miami, Ohio, and they know all about their predictive metrics and whatnot. But I don't know. Maybe I'll pick Miami, Ohio to pull off the upset of a lifetime.
I feel a little bit scarred from last year putting Drake as a 10 seed and then seeing them 46th overall. So hoping that I don't
That's
see
fair.
that again.
Yeah, that and UC San Diego was like what 47, 48. UC Irvine wasn't even among the first four out. Like God, they'll find any reason not to love mid majors. But anything else on any of these 9 teams you want to touch on?
Just really quickly, we didn't touch on Gonzaga, but
Yeah, yeah.
we both have them 13th, and I think they got a whole lot more interesting last night because all of a sudden their 3 seed prospects look pretty good. If they can just win the West Coast tournament, we've talked about it a lot. They get the hay in the barn at that point. West Coast Conference champions with probably another quad 1 win, possibly a quad 1A win if it's against St. Mary's in the final. All of a sudden, Gonzaga looks like a team that probably does belong on the 3 line, even if they have the Portland loss, the Michigan loss by 40. Now that I start naming these and saying it out loud, it still does sound really bad. But I think it will probably be enough just because the teams around them are taking bad losses.
Yeah, I think if they win the West Coast Conference tournament, they're going to find their way up to a 3 seed after last night's carnage. I think it was 801 bracketology last night. I was saying like now I'm like penning these letters to Purdue and Gonzaga like you've always been the one for me, baby. I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. You just can't find a 3 seed at this. We went from having 8 3 seeds to having 2 of them, and we're looking for anybody that belongs there anymore. But yeah, I think Gonzaga probably. I mean, they were what 12 in the reveal. Obviously, they lost at St. Mary's since then. But if they were to rebound and beat the Gales or the Broncos in that championship game, I think that probably gets them back up to the 3 line. But that will wrap us up for today. Uh, I hope I didn't jinx St. Louis into losing to Loyola Chicago by forgetting about that game on this graphic. If I do, I'm so very sorry, Billikens. But I'll be watching that one and all the other games.